Welcome to the Consultants Way podcast, your go-to resource for all things professional services consulting. Brought to you by McMahon & Ransford, a strategy consulting firm with over 30 years of experience helping B2B organizations achieve sustainable growth, and the Consultants Way, the leading comprehensive consultant development program. Hosted by Dean McMahon and Anthony Paluska, we share expert insights, firsthand experiences, and conversations with industry leaders on the topics that interest you most.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of their employer, company, or affiliated organizations.
Welcome back to the Consultants Way podcast. Anthony Paluska. I'm here with Dean McMahon, and today we are lucky to be joined by somebody we've both known for a while now and we've worked with for quite a bit, Bo DiMuccio over at TSIA. Bo is and I'll let you introduce yourself here in a second, Bo, but you are the thought leader of thought leaders on professional services and where the industry is headed. It is everybody that comes through our podcast and through our network references the studies and the reports and the information that you've produced. And I know that we've gone back working back before TSIA days to TSIA, right? On the just the professional services. And so we share a very strong passion towards that. And so very, very happy to finally get you on here, Bo. If you don't mind.
But we get credit just telling people we know you.
So, Bo, if you don't mind, do a brief introduction of yourself, and then I really want to dive into focusing the conversation today around the recent state of professional services in 2025 that you just recently published. But we'll get to that in a second. Give us a little background of who you are, and for the two or three folks that may not know what TSIA is all about.
You bet. And Anthony and Dean, it's just really a delight to be here with you guys. I agree. We go back quite a ways, and we've done some pretty cool things together. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more of that, and I certainly hope that's the case. It's an honor to be here. Yeah, I run our professional services advisory and research practice at TSIA. This is something I've been doing now this is my 18th year. Wow, doing that. Prior to that, I spent 5 or 6 years at Deloitte Consulting. I also ran the consulting services research practice at IDC. I have about a 26-year career in technology, advisory, analytics, thought leadership, that kind of thing. I think what I'm going to bring to the table today is just the wealth of information that we get from working with our hundreds of TSIA members. What's TSIA? It's part industry association, part advisory firm, part research house, and it's all those three things combined. We collect information from our customers, our members, and we aggregate it, analyze it, think about it, and play it back out to our customers in, we think, unique ways. Some of those ways we're going to talk about here today.
Great. Yeah, looking forward to it. So, Bo, I know you do this every year, or at least you have recently. You published the state of the professional services industry, and particularly, and you can clarify this a bit, but the big focus is professional services organizations that are embedded within large technology organizations, right? And you've highlighted some trends and some themes, and we can make that available to everybody, just the link to it associated with this. But walk us through what are the big ahas or insights this year at a high level, and then we can dive in.
You know, the timing of this podcast is pretty interesting. So yesterday we did the webcast version of the paper. So we take the paper, we do a public global webcast, and we had lots and lots of people join, and those folks respond to polls and they ask questions, and those questions are emblematic because we're getting, and this, I'm going to play this into answering your question. You get this incredibly interesting mix of questions about how do we keep the lights on, but how do we adapt and transform? There's a fascinating mix of those questions. What's popping, what's really interesting about all this? I would say that we keep getting unexpected answers to our hypotheses. You know how sometimes the economy will tank because there's an unexpected result in the jobs report or the inflation report, and you start to think maybe the expectations are screwed up. Maybe the models behind the expectations aren't quite right. Well, what do I mean by that? We continue to anticipate and expect radical change in our industry. And yes, you're right. Our focus has always been on technology embedded professional services. We have some pure plays in the mix, and we love our pure play customers. And we don't want to diminish the importance of the SIs and the pure plays that we do service. But probably 90% of our customers are technology companies with embedded services. And when you think about all of the things happening in the economy, in the industry, digital transformation, X as a service transformation, organizational transformation, digital customer experience emphasis, AI, all these kinds of things, shouldn't we be seeing just massive change? Shouldn't we be seeing organizational change? Shouldn't we be seeing financial and business model changes? We keep expecting to see those, and we have telemetry in place to sense when those, we have canaries set up in the coal mine all over the place. And the canaries are, here's the punchline, canaries are alive and well. So you ask, what are kind of the key takeaways? This I said yesterday in the webcast. We have more and more, like I guess you could call it disciplinization of these embedded services organizations. They're investing more in having specialized services engineering, specialized resource management, specialized project management, specialized operations, specialized finance. You'd expect less of that with an emphasis on big C customer success, with an emphasis on smoothing out lumpiness in handshakes from sales to services, services to support, support to success. You'd expect to see less and less of that. You're not. You'd expect to see maybe the financial models changing. Maybe less, I think I saw some of the bullet points that you guys provided to me, maybe less emphasis on profitability of those embedded services businesses. The fact is, if you look at the data, there's been an increase over the last couple of years of average net operating income, average project margin. The sizes of these businesses are not shrinking. You should see that. You should see all of these things, and we're not. And you want to know what the top 4 business challenges are. Talked about this yesterday in our webinar, and I'll say this and then I'll pause and we can have a conversation about it. But we have hundreds of clients and customers. We do hundreds of workshops, hundreds of performance assessments. We talk to our customers on a daily basis through this thing that TSIA calls inquiry. It's a question answer service that we offer. So we quantify all of these questions that come in and we fit them into our kind of, if you will, knowledge framework. So 4 things are popping by far without close seconds after this. How do I move to a subscription model in professional services? Anthony, you and I have worked on this topic together.
We've been on this topic for a while. Yes.
For a while. So that's still a very hot topic. And then guess what? What are the big use cases for AI in professional services? So those 2 things are popping, but also, what else is popping? How do I optimize and align my professional services strategy? And how do I optimize my professional services financial model? So what's that basically tell you? You have your top 4 things coming at us. 2 of them are fundamentally about how do we keep the lights on better and brighter. And then other 2 of them are how do we adapt and transform. So the top 4 things that we're talking to our customers about split evenly between business as usual, adapt and transform. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and those, I think you have the legacy and the inertia of the past versus the transformation of the future, and you're feeling that, and the fact that some of these topics are still the next thing that organizations are thinking about. Obviously, AI is newer, but the other ones, I mean, you tell me, those are problems you've been working with organizations to solve for years and years now, right? Strategy alignment between professional services role in the organization. We're still struggling with that. Are there any differences in how they're approaching that now or how they're thinking about that problem now? Or is it's been a lot of talk, but the momentum or the day-to-day get things done of our business and just operate and perform have prevented us from addressing many of these challenges? So, I mean, I guess at the core of that is this the same label but different things underneath it? Or is it truly the same and organizations just haven't gotten around to solving them yet?
That's such a great question, and there's so many things going on there. We also do a financial tracker. Maybe your customers and your clients have seen Thomas Law do his Technology and Service 50, Cloud 40. So we look at public financial statements of publicly traded companies. Some of them are born in the cloud, some of them are not. And then we analyze their financials and we take a look at what's going on in the technology industry from a spending perspective and from a margin perspective. We look at a lot at the financial models of these technology companies. And we all know that kind of the tech economy got thrown for a loop 4 or 5 years ago. COVID, then recession. So technology companies are struggling, right? And what happens historically when top line product growth is challenged? Where does the emphasis go? Where can you plug it? Services. Every time, services. So there's a bit of a paradox happening here. As we go forward in time, you tend to, as we said it already, you tend to expect to see these fundamentally radically changing economic models for services. But in fact, it looks like there's even more pressure on services to drive revenue and to drive margin and to drive echo effects like account growth and CSAT and renewal rate and all these sorts of things. So I think fundamentally, we're not, again, we keep expecting to see fundamental change and we're really not seeing it. So I think some of this is changing economy, more pressure on a diversity of revenue sources. And I think some of it is just there's just a lot of inertia in these businesses. You have legacy systems, legacy customers. Not everybody is jumping on your new fangled platforms. Not everybody is adopting your cloud versions of your legacy technologies. You have to be able to both keep the lights on and transform. I don't see anybody choosing one or the other. Or let me put it this way. I'm curious what you guys have seen.
You know,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, Bo, if you look at the way technology matured before it was so SaaS dominated, we found companies all the way back to IBM that, as you said, moved from innovation only to owning the customer, and owning the customer means sophisticated services. And they had a hard time doing it because they didn't understand that. Got it. But in SaaS right now, and I'm going to make some statements and you push back. We see a lot of, I just got brought into this mid-sized SaaS company because I was successful growing a different SaaS company, but I didn't grow it to the mid-level. I only grew it in the high growth new account level. I haven't been through the transformation to service revenue. So I'm still uncomfortable with running what we would call a complex business. So I fall back to what do I know, right? So we see the burden of breaking through to leveraging services is more about what the executive management of the SaaS industry understands as opposed to what the customer would buy.
Yeah, totally correct. And there are some big fallacies. The biggest fallacy in SaaS is that it's easy and simple to use. And it's not. And so there's a lot of complexity in it. And who gets to solve the complexity? It's the services part of the business. And as long as there's complexity in these solutions, services are going to be required to drive customer adoption, renewal, all those kinds of things. We don't all. The C-suite would like to see plug and play because You can get rid of these dilutive services businesses. You can partner on stuff that actually does need to be done. But I don't know about you guys, and this is what I'm going to say before. Every time, every time, that sounds like a hyperbole, but it's actually true. Every time I see somebody try to radically change the services model, they wind up having to unwind it and
Oh
reform.
yeah. When they're trying to um, do services to make up a word, right? We're going to make it so we're not going to play. We're going to that is one counter to what's best for them. But it gets back to the same thing you and I just said, is the leadership fundamentally, and by the way, it's because for 10 years they've been rewarded for a SaaS business model and self-serve. True or not, we do what, that's what the market, that's what the pricing, that's what the valuations,
Yeah,
and
not
and
crazy.
and like you said, we're waiting for that to change because it's a mirage, but our entire structure and organization supports it, of our
We
industry and everything.
we wrote a book a couple of years ago called Digital Hesitation, and
I
really
have
that
that
book is
book.
mostly about is SaaS failing to live up to its promise. And I think there are two reasons for that, and they're interrelated. One is I just said it, it's the naggingly consistent complexity of these solutions, especially in the enterprise, right? Down market, it's a little bit of a different story, maybe a lot of a different story, but there's just too much complexity in these solutions to be able to successfully drive services out of the operating model. That's one thing. And then the other thing is there is probably too much inertia organizationally. We are too stovepiped. There isn't enough breaking down of the silos. There should be more of that. But why do the silos persist? Because it turns out that some amount of silo is probably the right way to run these very different parts of the customer journey. And we'll come back to this. And I think one of the reasons why you're seeing continued health in the financial models of these embedded services businesses is turns out that's the best way to drive company and customer value, for that to be a self-sufficient activity that can fund itself, that can fund its innovation budget, that can fund its investments, its scalability. If you take that away and make it say, what's the nirvana? It's it's COGS. It's it's a cost of doing business. It's just embedded in the subscription. It's whatever. Turns out that's not a very effective way to grow and run and scale that part of the business, and it breaks. That's why born in the cloud SaaS companies, all of them start off with this image in mind of a highly integrated single customer experience, no handshakes, one P&L type of approach. And as they take on logos and get bigger and bigger, what happens? Especially from a services perspective, it starts to creak and groan and break, and people realize that that doesn't work at scale or over time. And so what do? They go find that lady, that guy from a larger SaaS company that had already successfully built that business, and they drop you in and they say, "Can you build that for us too?" And it's counter to everything we want to believe about we don't want to believe that. We know the reality. We know that when ambition collides with reality, reality wins. And reality is that, and it's going to at some point it's going to change. It might change within our careers. Anthony, yours for sure. Dean, we're probably on the back end of that. At
I'll
some
keep
point,
carrying the torch for us, right?
there you
We'll
go.
keep saying the same thing until something changes.
Gonna change. It's gonna change. We're gonna see it.
I'll
We're
be
gonna
on
feel it.
oxygen.
It's gonna happen at some point, but I don't see it. I'll say this, and then we can maybe switch gears. But I said this year the same thing I said last year. I'll say it again next year if I have to. PS looks a lot more like it did 5 years ago than it's going to look 5 years from now. I might have to revise those numbers at some point, but it's really the same comment that I'll make. Same thing. Same thing is still true.
Yeah, and one of the big drivers of that change at some point will be the role AI plays, and I definitely want to come back to that. But um, I mean, what you're speaking to is just the lack of a strategy that can get us to what is our business needing to look like in 5 years? What role do we need to play? How does that fit into the organization's objective and strategy? And hiring the lady or the guy that can come in that's been there and built it before or has run a big business doesn't mean that you're hiring necessarily the answer to your strategy. You're just hiring somebody that's managed a piece of that transformation, but this is going to look different in whatever organization they're being brought into. I, I'd love your thoughts on. I mean, what is preventing our PS leaders and then them getting the being the evangelist for this for others, right? From just defining this clear strategy, because you know you have well, you have all these structural changes, but structure should, and the siloization and the specialization and all of these things, but it seems like they're being done in advance of a strategy rather than the strategy informing the structure. And so, why is that such a struggle?
So I was doing a workshop earlier this week with a customer, big software company, global software company. And a lot of the pain and suffering that this team was feeling came from the fact that and you guys have seen this at least as many times as I have. The financial targets for that business are purely top down. They get a target, they get some incentives that may or may not align to those. And now they've got to back into an operating model, a go-to-market model, a portfolio, a resource model, whatever, to try to hit that, even if it's completely unnatural act. So that's a barrier. So this goes back to this alignment issue that you're touching upon. I think we're probably going to maybe talk about it a little bit more. But I think that that's part of it. You know, you get dropped in, and the business model and the financial model and the strategies just kind of happen because you're scrambling to keep the lights on. You're scrambling to keep people employed. You're scrambling to hit those targets, even though they might be completely out of sync with your actual mission and charter in life. And there's nothing really you can do about it because you're the tail and the rest of the organization's the dog. I think that's part of it. I think that's a big part of it.
We're artificially kind of manipulating our business model to achieve some target that isn't necessarily based in what's best for the organization from professional services role and what's actually possible out there in the market. There's 17, 18,000 SaaS companies that exist in the market right now. As we had another guest on recently, right? This concept of the land grab for all of the different SaaS services is done. And so now we're in a different game, and so the top line revenue growth and this high level of customer acquisition's gone away. Well, we still need to hit our revenue targets, so services gets more and more of that. But if services role wasn't to be its own commercial engine generating solutions and offers and expanding those relationships, now we're in a situation where we're being asked to do something from a goals perspective that is incongruent with the talent we have, with the offers that we have, with everything, right?
I think there's an additional problem, though. I think that unlike large companies, a lot of the growth tech are stock plays, not companies. The management team didn't come in to run a long-term business. They came in to drive a financial outcome for themselves. And that gives you a whole different view of investment and flexibility on my business model or what plays to run. And I wish they were addressing their growth through services and wanted to become experts on it. But I got to say, Bo, I haven't run across one of those in years that I sit down with the executives of, what was a fast, let's call them medium size now. I'm not talking about a giant company that already has hardware, software, and everything. Just, medium size. Yeah, they're not interested in that. And you deal with that every day.
I do, and you do see it now and again, and often it's because the person that is in the CCO chair or even the CEO chair, maybe the CRO chair, maybe they have good experience with services. Maybe they've come out of services and they kind of get it and they understand how counterproductive it can be to all kinds of things, to employee morale, to even the end product, for there to be such a out of sync situation between company and services objectives. Yeah, so why do you think that AI and subscription are so high up on the list? Because subscription potentially gives you ARR.
Yeah. Makes you more meaningful to those that's been their focus, right? It aligns you with the vision of why the product business is so attractive from a valuation perspective.
Get rid of transactional, lumpy, project-based, one-time fee revenue. Get rid of that. Make it more renewable, maybe ratable. So there's a high interest in that. And there's a high interest in AI for the promise of efficiency, maybe being able to lower headcount, maybe all those things that you potentially get that serve the company's interests, maybe not the customer's interests, but it's in keeping with that concept of what drives shareholder value, right? So I ask the question almost on a daily basis of benchmarking customers, of advisory customers. Do you have a PS strategy? Do you have a documented PS strategy? And a lot of the time, people will say yes, probably half of the time. And then when they say yes, then what do? You open up the hood and look at it. And some of the parts are there, most of the parts are not. Like you guys were framework driven, so we produce a framework on this, and we know what good looks like, and we do a lot of engagements with customers to help them adopt that framework and really drive it through. But you can't successfully think through from charter to target financials to portfolio to go to market to delivery to partner. You can't really successfully think through all of that in a vacuum. You've got to have stakeholders at least bought in to the initial set of concepts. What are we in business to do? What are we really here for? And once you figure that out, it tells you a lot about what kind of changes you need to make to the portfolio, to the sales model, to the delivery mix model, to the FTEs versus subcontractors, to outsourcing to partners, to do we need new skills altogether? It's a very well-defined process, but if you're the tail being wagged by the dog, then you feel like you can't manage up. So a lot of what we're trying to do with our customers, and I'm sure you guys are too with your PS customers, is give them the data, the ammunition, the talk track, the business cases to be able to more effectively manage up. It's very hard. It's very hard to do that, especially if you don't have a seat at the table. That's the fallacy of a break even or underwater financial model. You do not have a seat at the table unless you're a self-sustaining business, and even then, you might be at the little kids table.
Yeah, because you're still dilutive in the eyes of certain execs, right?
You can see the table.
Yeah.
You can look up at it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's a lot of those things, Anthony, that you already mentioned. Maybe stakeholders outside of services that don't understand what it takes to scale a services business. They really don't want to be in the services business, or they have good intentions but just can't spell services. And so, what do you do with those stakeholders? I don't think there's any really option but to try to engage them. But I tell you that it's fraught. You guys, I'm sure, have seen this. When you try to engage stakeholders, I tell you, in a workshop, it raises the stakes of that workshop a lot. And your PS stakeholder that really is your client is sticking his or her neck out. You're sticking your neck out. And if you really do it well, then you up level their IQ quite a bit. You can do that very successfully, I think, with good data and good frameworks and good use cases and all those kinds of things. And you do have a chance, and I have seen some successes of PS leaders, very strong PS leaders, successfully managing up and successfully educating at least about the benefit of being in alignment, and then taking that alignment and leveraging it to develop an achievable game plan. And you document all that in a strategy, and now you've got a pretty good chance of everybody being successful, including the company and the customers. But it's not easy. There's nothing simple or easy about it.
I always think about there, and I'll leave this company's name out, but there's a large software company in my hometown, Houston, that was started by a bunch of guys who left Accenture, and it started in an integrated service-led model, and they actually bought the software companies, but they're one of the few, because they didn't know any better. They didn't come out they didn't come out of traditional software, that their business always grows every year. Revenue's always great, margins always clean, and they even use no service people that aren't consultants, and the consultants do everything in service, answer the phones. It's across the board, and it's a very interesting model. And I've had both the COO that used to be there used to work for us, and then I had a son-in-law that worked there, and it was just fascinating to watch. But that is the far way out model, and they're not running, although they're private equity invested now. But by the time they were private equity invested, they had proven the model. So, but I still live in hope, Bo. I didn't want to leave you to. We wouldn't be dedicating, my youth to this topic if and I believe in it, and I believe it's so powerful for the companies to do. But I liked your take on AI, because when I hear, and we ask a lot of questions about AI, but when I hear it, it's always about still trying to get to that, self-serve, still trying to take out activities, still trying to, smooth out, make it easy. And by the way, I don't know of one survey I've done or one survey I've read where the customers want that. Right? The customers don't mind paying, they want success.
They want success, they want it cheaper. I mean, that's part of the pressure you're seeing. The CEOs of these business technology consumers read Forbes, and they read Wall Street Journal, and they expect to see all kinds of cost savings coming through in their technology purchases, and they expect to see lots of level of effort being squeezed out of these engagements.
And it should be, right? For the amount that the United States spends on tech, we should get outcomes.
Absolutely. We should, but there's a little bit of an unrealistic expectation right now. And I think that maybe we can live up to that promise someday. And we're certainly seeing a lot of interest in it. And you guys might want to talk about what we are seeing in that space. But listen, just to close off on the stakeholder kind of misalignment piece, we navigate these conversations daily, just like you do. And one of the things that I often say is that, look, I believe everybody in the mix is sincere. It's not like there's corruption involved. Everybody wants the same thing: company and customer value. The question becomes, when thinking about this part of the business, which might be small, maybe it's 5% of the company, 7, 10, 12, 2%, critical. If it wasn't critical, it wouldn't be there. You wouldn't do it. And if you didn't have to have it, you wouldn't have it. So what's the best way to shape and structure and execute that part of the customer journey? That's what all the debate's about. And it's not crazy. There's sincere differences of opinion about what the emphasis should be. Should we be focused more on, I'm getting ready to do a workshop next week on pricing with a customer. And you can't talk about pricing your services unless you stack hands on why you're in business. And if you're in business because you're a significant part of the revenue and a significant part of the margin, guess what? That affects your pricing model and the way you approach discounting and solutioning. But if you're in business to drive customer adoption quickly, well, then that's a different pricing model, isn't it? So The first order of business is to figure out why you're in business. Why are you doing this? What's the mission and charter? Everything else flows from it, including, and to some extent, what you're going to invest in AI and how much and on what.
Yep. And it's a good segue. So, you've stated, right, we're still in most organizations are still in the exploration phase of how's AI actually going to work. Would love to hear some examples and some things that you all are seeing around that topic, and two subtopics if you have any insight specifically on these. Some real world use cases and examples of organizations that have found some early wins and success with AI would be great. And then the other one is the other side of that equation, which is, and you alluded to it earlier, we're cutting costs and we're going to get more efficient, and that might result in losing talent. And so, any early indicators you have on what this means about just, are we going to see layoffs in professional services driven by AI? So take the AI topic wherever you want, but those two things, right? People are asking for and looking for, what are some of the early indicators and some wins that organizations have seen, and then what's going to happen to the number of people that we actually need in these organizations?
Yesterday in the webinar, we got lots of questions coming in. Half of them were about subscription, SaaS type offers for services, and the other half were about AI, right? And there was one participant that asked the question, "Hey, are there some no-brainer, right? If we want to just get out of the starting blocks on this, what are some of the no-brainer use cases?" And that's where a lot of these that question's emblematic, right? We're nowhere on this. How do we get somewhere fast? And maybe you're seeing the same thing. And every day that goes by, the answer can't be nowhere. The answer cannot be nowhere. You have to have some sort of a strategy for this. So we asked the question in the webcast yesterday. Do you have a PS strategy? Definitely. Kind of. Not really. Not at all. And only about 25% of the listeners said definitely yes, we've got a well-documented PS strategy. The rest of them were in some form of, not really. The next question was, does your strategy include a specific game plan around AI? And almost nobody said yes to that question. So our industry is going to stay where it is until we start to really take this topic and do what we do with it. What do we do? We're project managers. We're execution experts. We're business outcome experts. You need to apply that same sort of skill set and toolkit to AI. And because there are big opportunities, and a lot of the use cases that we're seeing, you're probably seeing the same thing, they are no-brainer use cases. Just in the webcast that we did yesterday, AI was listening, and instantaneously you could get a summary with key bullet points. All you had to do was click a button, right? Think about that 2 years ago, before you ever heard thing one about ChatGPT. That was a totally manual process. Well, you guys are probably having similar successes with recording meetings, Gong, whatever it might be, summarizing meetings. Those are no-brainer use cases that you're seeing pretty widespread adoption of. We think, if you go look at our content on this, I have some of it open right now. We basically think that there are two or three basic use cases. Internal process optimization, client delivery optimization, and then there's a subset of organizations that are taking their technology and their expertise around AI and deploying it to their customers. So they take AI, much like a call center, like Genesis Telecommunications takes call center technology and deploys it. So Dell and HP and these sorts of organizations are making a lot of hay helping their end customers become AI proficient with their technology, their servers, their solutions, their software. So by far today, the most common use cases are in that internal kind of workflow optimization. When you ask people and you give them a tick list of things that they're using AI on. Actually, we do have a survey a pretty extensive study that's in the field right now and collecting responses. If your podcast listeners want to participate in it, all they have to do is go to tsia.com and navigate to our survey portal, and they can participate in it and get all the outcome. So what percent of people do you think, or people of respondents are saying that they're using AI to automate resource planning and resource allocation? I'm looking at the live results right now. This is a test.
It's under single digits, not under single digits, single digits.
Under single digits, I like it.
Yeah. Under 10.
That's a low number, man.
So it's
4.
so right now it's 8%.
All right. Well, some of them are stretching the truth a little bit.
Probably. But that's still a very small percentage. But that's an obvious use case, especially when you start thinking about kind of the other vector in all this is one vector is AI, predictive AI, something that's been around for decades, right? We're just getting better and better at it. Generative AI, right? More, it's a newer thing. And then agentic AI is that kind of bleeding edge thing that we're seeing right now. So analytics and using big data to do predictive analysis, that's something that there's fairly widespread adoption of. Even if you don't call it AI, you call it intelligent automation, you call it business analytics, whatever you call it, that's pretty common. The generative AI can be very interesting for developing SOWs, for developing use cases, for developing business cases. To what extent are folks doing that kind of thing? So workflow automation, that's a big use case. That's almost 80% of our respondents are saying right now that they're using AI to optimize internal operations in the form of workflow automation. Very few of them are doing things like talent management or acquisition or even solutioning, right? AI can be very helpful in service development, ideation, those kinds of things. Not seeing a whole lot of that right now. But then when you think about client delivery, what are the opportunities there? They're massive. For example, using analytics and generative AI to help us understand project performance and help us focus on projects that have all of the signs and signals of going yellow or going red. So are you using those things in, for example, project management or project execution? A lot of folks are experiencing some successes in those realms. So it's a very fascinating area to be in, to look at how these use cases are actually evolving and developing in practice. We see a lot of efficiency gains in developing training materials, right? We have customers, and we're just getting ready to publish one from a company called Relias. Very early use cases on using generative AI to develop training materials, saving 60 or 80% of the effort on that. That's the kind of thing you're going to see more and more of, I think. So then the question becomes, which is your question, Anthony, what happens to that labor? And so the layoff engine has been cranking for a few years now. And a lot of it has to do with either real or perceived efficiency gains. And the perceived part, I want to know what you guys have to say about this. The perceived part is probably it trumps everything else. Because the executives they believe that there's going to be all this efficiency gain from these investments, and they're trying to pay for those investments. How are you going to pay for the investments before they have direct economic return? You pay for them by getting rid of people. And so the layoffs aren't just maybe going to happen in professional services. They are. I don't know what percent of your clients are coming back to you and telling you that they just did a RIF and that their utilization is all of a sudden 10 points higher.
It's one of the most common conversations. And to make that even broader, I had a conversation with a CEO of a $30 billion company. She thought she could take out 30% of the whole company. And where did that
probably
come?
does it in advance of
The
realizing
entire
that.
company.
The anticipatory cuts.
Yeah, because Yeah, but one of the weird things about it, Bo, that we do see, and this is in the pure play a little bit more, is some of the activities that junior people used to participate in to learn, they're not involved in now. So you see this weird thing where the senior people travel, the junior people don't. The junior people aren't invited to meetings because we can get the notes taken, and we're self-fulfilling, having less developed people, and that's across the board. But I think what we also see right now, Bo, and this is related, is just a raft of heads of PS being let go. I mean, more than I've seen. I mean, I think half the calls I take are, hey, we were going to do this over there, but we're not going to do this because I got let go today. So that's an interesting phenomenon.
I have a feeling that you're going to see some of that unwound. I think there's going to be some riff regret. And then it's going to be interesting how you're going to reskill and retool and restaff these things when we find that you actually can't squeeze out as much level of effort as you thought you could. But look, you should be able to squeeze out some level of effort. If you make a living doing the routine and the mundane, you better find something else to do. And so I think, for example, highly skilled project management isn't going away, but maybe that lower level of project coordinator can be automated. And that's in a variety of ways. And if that's true, that's probably good way to get labor and effort out of the system. Another way to get labor and effort out of the system is to standardize and productize and make repeatable what you're doing. That's a more conventional way, but it also is something that you can use AI for. Feed an offer set into an AI engine, ask it to simplify it for you and come up with ways to make it repeatable, simple, standard, scalable. Now you don't need as much project management overall. Some of it's out of the offer.
Well, I think when you feed it in and get it out of AI, you can also find out what you can take out and move overseas, right?
Absolutely.
I've simplified this enough. I don't need an expensive resource anymore.
Absolutely.
And
But
we're seeing that all the time in our own firm, is things we can say, I, we can make this productized, this process, and we can take out a bunch of steps, and then we can have somebody. I have somebody right now doing a lot of work in the Philippines that I used to have 2 or 3 people do here. So, and but again, junior people aren't getting trained in that, right? They're not getting this, the are we going to end up with just really old, guys who can and gals that can run things, like, and then no junior people learning? I mean, that is a concern.
there are going to be unintended consequences that you could set your watch to it. Punchline, I think, on all this is right now I'm looking at the live data from the survey coming in. You ask PS leaders to assess the maturity of their AI initiatives, and only 3%, usually somewhere around 3%. I just did a refresh because I just sent out some requests to see more. Okay, so it's right at about 3% still. So the and they're rating themselves, right? So you're going to assume if you're going to rate yourself, maybe you might overrate yourself. So 3% of the industry right now is saying we have highly mature AI capabilities. So there's a lot of room for improvement in this. Maybe it's just, and then we keep expecting to see that number to go up, and it's not going up. It's been about 3% for a year and a half now. You explain that to me.
Yeah, it's everybody is waiting on the silver bullet or some mirror magic thing that'll come out of the AI tools rather than taking some of those incremental steps that you talked about to just start that journey, start exploring and start finding out ways you can get incrementally more efficient with the whole process rather than thinking it's going to overhaul how your entire business operates. It's got to be something along those lines. Uh, Well, Bo, I mean, you've been very gracious with your time here. We clearly could spend a lot longer going with you, and we'll probably need to get you back on here and do that again, and we can pick some even more targeted topics. But I'd like, if you could, hey, if you're advising a professional services leader today, what's the one or two things that you would just suggest that they think about, do differently? Right? Just what are some key one or two key takeaways for our PS leaders?
Well, until I learn differently, and I'm open to it, there is no substitute for maturity. The capabilities that you needed 10 years ago, you still need them. They're not the same exact capabilities, and you need to tune them differently and change them around the edges. But if you want to be in a position to effectively keep the lights on and provide value to the company and to customers, and you want to maybe be a lighthouse within your company for innovation and transformation, you can do both of those things, but you can't do either of them if you have lousy processes, lousy tools, the wrong skills, you don't have a clear strategy, you haven't stacked hands on a charter. Think about it this way. If you're, and Anthony and I, this is something you and I have kind of drilled into. It sounds wonderful to try to take all your project revenue and maybe make some of it renewable, subscription based, flexible consumption, ratable. Wow, that sounds awesome. Okay. So if you're lousy at resourcing projects, you're going to be even lousier at resourcing continuous engagement. In other words, that skill set needs to now be leveled up a notch or more to be able to give you the opportunities and the capabilities to now do both things at the same time. Be very, very efficient at resourcing, at skill management, at project assignment. If you're really good at that, you have a shot at being successful operationally at subscription. But if you're not, forget it. It's a bridge way too far. So our guidance might sound self-serving to some of your listeners, but the things that you needed to be good at 10 years ago, you still need to be good at. There are some new things you need to be good at. And those things that you need to be good at 10 years ago, you need to be even better at them actually today if you're going to be a serious agent of customer and company success and transformation. That's our guidance, is to really think very carefully about upskilling and making your business and your whole kind of, if you will, patch more scalable, driving company and customer success over time and at scale. Being able to do that is the secret to success, I would say.
Well, we love hearing you talking about upskilling because that's really what we're all about. Hey, thank you, Bo. God, our relationship has been a long time, but it's been so wonderful, and you're such a. And I just want everybody to know, Bo's not just a brain; he's actually a really good person,
Thank you.
and he's involved in a lot of meaningful things that are in addition to just helping the PS world be better at our job. And Bo, we couldn't thank you more. And we would love, as Anthony said, we'd love to have you back a few times. And you're gracious to give us the time, Bo.
Anytime, just let me know. Happy to
Wonderful.
do it.
Well, Bo, yeah, we appreciate it. We will link to the couple of things that you referenced here, so that everybody can participate in that. And to your last point at the end there, there are tools and guides and advisors, and there's help to get all of these things. And TSA is certainly one of the major ones out there. And Bo, I will see you in person soon. I'll be in Orlando, so. For everybody out there, TSIA does conferences twice a year, is it, Bo?
That's right.
For their audience, and anybody's open to register and join and get some of this knowledge, meet Bo, and all sorts of stuff. So we'll see you out there, and if anybody's interested in that, we'll link to that as well.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Great conversation.
Bo, appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
You bet.
Well, it's always great to see Bo. I mean, just on a personal level, I just love Bo. He is, and I meant what I said earlier. Bo's involved in some very meaningful things. Bo has given money to the nonprofit My Family Star. I mean, he's just a good guy. But wow, so many things that confirm what we see in the market, and because they actually see more data than anybody else. But man, it made me anxious and to get our market better, to move it down the road more. I hate to think of PS executives living in this area of pressure and confusion and not being supported, and the AI thing, though, I kind of expected that AI is, and this is no offense to the tech world, but we like topics, and then we like to push those topics, right? I always think of them as big waves we can sell into, right? So everybody had to be SaaS, everybody had to be off premise, and now it's everybody has to be
Big data. Big data is my favorite
big
one.
data. Pick your
What is big data?
ERP, right? It didn't matter.
Big data meant anything that you wanted to do that touched data.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, but yeah, what did you think?
No, look, it's always great to get some of those insights and perspective. He did confirm a lot of the things that other guests have shared anecdotally, and as we're seeing, as we're just engaging with the market. His couple of very practical things, and some of that survey data, not surprising, but it's alarming how few PS organizations have a strategy and how few have done anything on their AI journey, and these things that as we've just bounced them around with him, there's some pretty simple steps you can take to move the ball forward on all of those topics. And a lot of the pain that we're seeing organizations and leaders and everybody dealing with are symptomatic of you just haven't taken some of those initial steps, and just getting started with doing something and trying to advance your strategy, trying to collect some of the data and information to bring your executive team along to what we're trying to do as a PS organization and why, beginning to explore the very simple practical use cases around AI. The big takeaway I took from that whole thing is there's a lot of little things you can start doing now to make your lives easier as a professional services organization, and no reason to wait on some of that, because there's always going to be a reason not to, and there's always going to be the change, and don't let the organizational inertia, as Bo would say, hold you back from making incremental progress on those topics.
We'll have Bo back, and I encourage everybody to go to their website, join their surveys. You're going to be in Orlando.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's too late to get to Orlando, but get to the next one.
Oh, Orlando is at the end of April. I think you can still sign up. So yeah, no, I'd love to see anybody out there, but also check out the TSIA group and see what other information, whether you can get to Orlando or not. They have a couple conferences a year and tons of content and information that is always available as a member. So
as you said, we were involved before they were TSIA. So
yes, and we've co-delivered with them. We've done lots of projects with them. We've created content together. We've worked on clients together. And we've worked across that organization and attended lots of their conferences. So I can speak firsthand. There's lots of value in what they can offer. So I encourage everybody to take advantage of that. Yep. All right. As always, like, share, subscribe, do all the things that you know to do on YouTube and podcast networks. And then feel free to reach out to Dean or I on our individual LinkedIn's or on the Consultants Way page, or email us at podcast@consultantsway.com. Always interested to hear from you. Thanks.